Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with JcrOffroad. In this video, we're going to be installing a roof rack on this Ford Maverick. So right here we have all of the main rack components. You're going to get 5 of the extruded aluminum crossbars you see here, the front fairing, 2 of the black textured powder coat side rails, as well as 2 of the gray textured powder coat accent plates. We have all our mounting brackets and hardware, and we'll go through assembling all of that now. Now all of these crossbars are pretty much going to install the same way. They have threaded holes out on the ends. One end is going to have a pair of these milled slots. Those are to install accessory mounting hardware such as T-nuts later on. Just pay attention and look for those. We typically put them all just facing up and toward the driver's side, but whatever works best for you is totally fine. And then those are going to bolt through the slotted holes in the side rails that you can see along here. The hardware you're using for that are going to be 1/4 button heads with washers. These we're going to recommend just a little bit of anti-seize lubricant on before they go in, since they are a stainless fastener going into an aluminum crossbar here. And then you can just pass that through the side rail and get it started into the crossbar. Once you have both of those fasteners started by hand, you can grab a 5/32 hex and tighten them up. We're just going to go toward the center of the slot for now, and then you can adjust those later on when installing your gear. You can then go ahead and repeat that process for the remaining 3 crossbars in these upper slotted holes. When you get to the back of the rack, this rear crossbar, the only real difference here is that it's going to mount vertically in the 2 round holes here along the side. So again, you're going to have those slotted holes here. Do with those as you wish. If you're going to be mounting accessories, potentially cargo lights or anything off of the back of this, you might want to keep them exposed. If you want kind of the cleanest look, you can tuck them in toward the inside where they're not visible. Again, whatever works best for you there. This one's going to install with those same 1/4 button heads. And once you have all 5 of these bolted in, you can go over and do the same thing on the other side to kind of complete the main frame of the rack. From there, you can grab your front fairing. Just before you bolt this in, you'll want to find the provided edge lock trim and install that along this front edge. Technically, it only needs to contact anywhere in here that this is going to contact the roof. So basically along this radius, as well as wrapping around the peaks. But the piece we provide will pretty much run all the way out to the ends if you choose to run it that way. The way this goes on is you're just going to have to spread it just a little bit and start one corner. And then press it up onto this edge, working all the way across the fairing. Now this one turned out about perfect and covered end to end on our fairing. There is just a little bit of variation in the length of these. So if you receive it and it's a little too long out here, a good pair of tin snips or sheet metal shears, if you will cut this pretty easily. And then these are essentially aluminum impregnated to help keep kind of that pinch on the end of the fairing. So if you see any of that poking out of the end, just grab that with a pair of pliers and peel it out of there so that it can't contact the paint or the powder coat on the rack. And then you can go ahead and move forward. So the fairing will then just slide in between the 2 side rails, and you're just lining up the 3 slotted holes on the fairing with the 3 round 1/4 holes here on the outside. You're using the same 1/4 button heads here, this time with serrated flange nuts on the inside. With all that hardware in place, you can just slide this all the way up and kind of lightly snug it up for now. We'll need to adjust that later on once this is up on the vehicle. Now I've stood the rack up and we can grab our texture gray side accent panels. I'm just going to kind of overlay this here, and I kind of got a little ahead of myself earlier by installing this rear crossbar already, so I do have to temporarily remove these 2 bolts in the back. Those are going to line up with corresponding holes in the side accent panel. So we'll get this roughly lined up here, and then we can reinstall those 2. Now from here moving forward, the 4 holes that run roughly along the center of this panel are going to get the black 1/4 button heads and washers that are provided in the bolt pack for it. They also get the serrated flange nuts on the back side. So we'll install those real quick. The remaining empty holes closer to the bottom are going to be for the mounting brackets that are going to bolt to the roof of the vehicle as well. So those are going to be open for a moment until we get those brackets installed. And this is also a good time to point out the hardware itself. So like I mentioned, it's going to be black hardware for these four. That's what we always send with those. If you want black hardware for your entire rack, we do sell a black hardware kit, so pay attention to that at the time of ordering, and you can get that as well and kind of black out this whole side if that's what you prefer. We can then install those mounts on the rack, starting with the front mount here. So you're gonna have two slotted mounting holes that are gonna correlate with the two round holes here on the side rail. You then have a round hole here that's going to go down on the roof of the vehicle once we get this thing up in place. These again are using the same 1/4-20 hardware, so you can just slide that in here, line up your holes, and start your hardware with that mount stepping down and forward toward the front of the rack. With both bolts started, we'll just snug these up by hand for now so that this thing is at least a little bit snug and not wobbling, and then continue on. The next two brackets are going to be the same, so both of these mid mounts in here, they both have a slotted hole top and bottom, but one of these is going to be slightly wider. That's the one that's going to go down toward the roof of the vehicle. The smaller one is going to go out here against the side rail, and then as you can kind of see here, these are going to step down and in. Lastly, the rear mount is also going to have a slotted hole that goes up here to the side rail. It's going to have a slightly larger round hole here that goes down to the roof. This one again is going to step down and in, angling toward the back of the rack or the back of the vehicle. And we can bolt that in again with our 1/4-20 button head. Once those are all at least hand tight, you can repeat this process over on the other side for both the side accent and the mounts. Now inside the vehicle, we've got to work to prepare the vehicle to accept the roof rack. For that, we've got to get the black plastic trim that is out on the top side off, and that is bolted in with kind of studs that come down through the roof and nuts that go onto those that are hidden up behind the headliner. So that does require you to remove this headliner or at least partially drop it down to access that hardware. We're going to start out by removing the visors up here in the front. So for that, you can pop it out on the one side, and then you have a plastic cover right here that has to be removed. Just this little 90-degree pick is all I grabbed. Obviously, multiple things would work, but basically you've got to get that kind of spread out just a little bit while pulling down. You may have to work at these for just a moment, but eventually they're going to pop. You can do that on both sides if it doesn't already just kind of fall down, and then when you swing that out of the way, it'll expose a screw here. For that, you'll need to grab a T20 Torx. You can remove this screw and just make sure you have this supported, since there is some wiring up in there that we'll have to disconnect. And of course, save all your hardware. You'll have to rotate this back around to the front, I believe, which should allow you to pivot it and relieve the hook kind of that's molded into it up here. With that freed up, you can then just carefully pull this wiring down until you find the connector, and that's just going to have a small tab that you're going to be looking for that you can press in on and pull the two halves apart, and then just set this off to the side for now. Then while you still have that T20 Torx, you can remove the latch for that visor as well. That's just got a single screw kind of hidden up inside of there. And same deal, save the hardware and just set this off to the side. You're also going to pull this A-pillar trim. So on the outside, you just got to get in behind the door seal so you can grab the edge of it and then just pull straight in toward the center. That should kind of free up the clips that hold that in place. And then there is almost like a bungee in behind here, and to unbolt that, you'll find the stud up here, and with a 10mm socket, remove the nut that secures the tab holding that in place. Just make sure you don't drop that down inside of there and lose it. Once that tab's freed up, just make sure it's not caught on anything in behind there, and then when you pull up, it should release the lower tabs. This front one can be a bit tricky, so you may have to reach in behind there and help that one out. There you can kind of see the two tabs, and then of course they're going to have little slots that they drop in down there. You'll then want to remove this plastic kind of trim bezel or cover up above your mirror. I'm just going to hook the pick I have around this top edge, and then essentially you can just pull straight down. There's just 4 clips holding this in. You could also use a plastic pry tool to get started in there if you were worried about getting up against the glass with a metal tool. And then really, once those 4 clips pop, you can just let that hang. It does have one tethered clip up here, so if you want to fight that out, you may be able to and just set it over on a bench or whatever the case may be, but that's all you need to be able to drop this down a little bit and access that hardware we're talking about. We can then remove these grab handles, both front and rear. We're doing this on the passenger side because the driver's side doesn't typically have one, but these just have a small cutout inside of the plastic covers here that you can slide the pick or a flat screwdriver into and pull these out. They will fall all the way out, so be ready for that. And then from there, there's going to be a metal tab inside of here. You're basically going to have to pry on it while you pull a little bit out on the handle, putting some pressure on there. So I'm going to do the bottom first, and then come up and pry on the top tab. And do the same thing here in the back. And like that back one did, they may stay up top in the roof. Not a big deal. You can just pinch in on those top and bottom tabs and pull them out of there. And then same thing, pinching in on that, you can reinsert it into the handle. It'll snap all the way back in. You want to get this front one back in as well. And then that thing is ready to be reinstalled later. Moving back to this B-pillar, you first have to pop out the lower trim section so that we can access a screw and get this one removed. So again, you got to get behind this door seal and grab this outside edge. You can pull straight out. And there should be, I believe, 4 clips in here, so 2 up top, 2 further down. And it looks like actually 6, so there's 4 further down in there, but essentially that's what you're looking for, is to get this out of the way. You can then kind of just flex this out of the way, exposing the one small screw down here on the front side of this panel. You'll need a 7mm socket for this. And once again, make sure not to drop or lose these. And then you can grab the panel and pull straight out. And then just kind of let that come down out of the way. Now here in the back seat, you will need to fold this down so that you can access some of the trim behind here. You have to pop this seatbelt trim up. So I've just got a small screwdriver to get started underneath here. And then it's just got 1 clip on each side, I believe. And we'll just get that up and out of the way for now. From there, you need to remove this center trim panel. So for that, you're basically just pulling clips straight out all the way across. And then to completely separate that, you do need to pull out on this bottom one. It'll pop some clips there, but also allow you to separate the two and get this back out of the way for now. They are still going to be retained to the seat belt, so keep that in mind. They'll kind of have to just sit in behind here unless you wanted to go through with removing that entire seat belt assembly. Then back on this C-pillar, it's a lot like the B-pillar, so you do have to get the lower trim out first. So again, get in behind the seal and pull outward. Now the top clip here in the back corner can be kind of problematic because the clip that it snaps into is honestly a pretty flimsy piece of sheet metal, so it wants to deform and come out with the panel rather than allowing the clip to release. So being aware of that, you'll have to get back in there with a long flat screwdriver or a panel tool or something to kind of help that out and it may take a little bit of time to work at that one. Having done one on the other side just a moment ago, this one went pretty quickly for me, but just keep that in mind. There you can kind of see the tab, and like I mentioned, how it does deform pretty easily, so that's what you're fighting back in there. Just like the last one, you'll need a 7mm socket, and you do have a screw in behind here, kind of on that front edge, if you will, that you can remove. With the screw out of the way, you can start with the bottom and pop the lower tab out, and then hopefully that should give you enough access that you can get in here with a panel tool to help out with the top two tabs. Again, take your time with these. So admittedly, once again, this one is a pretty difficult spot. I did wind up switching to a longer tool that helped me get in there a little better. The wiring for this is just another small press style tab for the speaker itself, and then the metal clip on the back portion actually stayed up here in the body, so that you can slide up and pull out with the way that's slotted, and then you will want to make sure to press that back onto the plastic tab out here. Moving back up to the front, we did decide to go ahead and just get this panel all the way down. So basically, again, it's going to be hard to see here because they're pretty small, but this just has two little locking tabs on the cable portion of this clamp, and there's a slot on here. So you basically have to slide it in, turn it, slide the other one in, turn it, and that's what locks it in. But you do want to make sure that you get both of those back in during reassembly. And then we have a couple different connectors up in here that we're going to unplug before allowing this to drop down. Now you'll notice that ours is equipped with a sunroof. Those of you that don't have that, this may differ slightly, but in ours, we're gonna grab right on top of this sunroof opening. In behind here, this is essentially held up with magnets at this point. So you're just gonna pull down until those release. And at that point, your headliner is pretty much free to just drop down. So be aware of that. You wanna let this just rest down, and we can then access the hardware to get that trim removed. Now, keeping in mind as we let this hang down, it is going to be essentially hanging on the wire harness that runs along the front of here and connects out in both of these A-pillars. I know hanging it from the wire harness isn't necessarily ideal. That being said, this is pretty light and we don't plan to have it that way for very long, so we're pretty comfortable with that. If you want to go through the extra steps, there's a few clips in here you can remove, and then you can unplug both of those connectors and find a different way to prop this up. Now, we did decide to pop headrests back in the two front seats because that just added a little bit of support to this. We can then get in here and access the nuts that we need to remove. So the first one up front is up kind of inside of a channel, so you're not going to be able to see it on video here, but it has a nice kind of oval shaped cutout. You'll need a 10mm socket to get up in there and remove this one. And then with those out, you can kind of see it. They're a tall gray nut with a large washer on them. So that's what you're looking for as you work the rest of the way back as well. As we move further back, the next two you're going to be looking for are here just in front of and behind the B pillar. I couldn't really get my socket in there without rubbing up against the airbag pretty hard, so I switched to a ratcheting wrench for these, which lets us get in here a little bit easier. Then on the very back one, back in this C-pillar area, you're looking for another large kind of oval cutout. This one is recessed up in there again. It's even tighter to the airbag in a way. So you actually want to come in behind the airbag between it and the body. we've got a 10 mil socket on a long extension here, and then you will have to kind of just guide that up in there by feel, since you won't really be able to see it very well. And then we can once again get that nut removed. And then just be extra cautious as you come out so that you don't drop that down in the pillar. That would not be ideal. With all of those fasteners removed, you can come outside of the vehicle and remove this trim. So just starting at the back, you can lift up to free up those studs. And then once you get all the way to the front, you do just kind of have to pivot this up and then slide back to get it out from under the windshield. With that trim removed from the roof, basically what we're going to recommend at this point is a dry fit or a test fit of the rack up there on the roof. So you'll take your assembled rack and set it down on there, lining it up with all the holes, and then you'll find the M6 mounting hardware to install through all of these brackets. Basically the purpose for that is to align them so that we can have them all kind of properly located once we put our TV up there and we're setting this in place for the final time. You will want a friend to help you set this up here ideally so that you don't risk damaging the vehicle or the rack along the way. And then from there you'll find the M6 button heads in your bolt pack along with the slightly oversized M8 washers. Those are what you're going to drop into all of these holes all the way around on the rack to properly locate it, and those tabs. And then as you go to tighten them down along the side, you just want to make sure that you're pressing down on them so that they're nice and flat to the roof surface itself. And that way we know they're properly positioned when we go to install this for the final time. So once again, just work your way all the way around, get all of those tight. We'll pop this back off and get prepped for that final install. So with that out of the way, we've got just some residue-free glass cleaner here. Isopropyl alcohol works great for this as well. You're just gonna go in and clean out this channel specifically around all of the mounting holes, again on both sides. Once that's cleaned off, we're ready to apply our RTV. So we just have some Permatex Ultra Black right here. Anything comparable should work just fine. You just want to be ready to work somewhat quickly at this point, at least within the manufacturer's guidelines, so that you get this all installed before that dries up. So with that being said, we're just gonna go around every single hole and apply a nice bead of sealant. We want to be pretty generous here so we get a nice good seal, and again just do that at all 8 hole locations. With that in place, we're going to have our hardware ready once again, and then we're going to very carefully set the rack back down, trying to line it up as best as possible with all of these mounting holes. Once you have it up here and you're happy with the alignment, I did pull the 2 front bolts on this fairing so that we could rotate it up out of the way, which is actually going to help us out in just a few minutes, so no worries there. We're then going to apply just a little more RTV kind of right on top of the hole here and just a little bit around it so that we can pass the bolt through the RTV, through the bracket, through the roof, and down inside. And then inside there you are reusing factory nuts so that you have those nice oversized washers on there. So we'll have to open up this door and reach in there to get that started. Now admittedly, this step can be a little bit messy as you're reaching in there kind of blind to get a couple of these started. So keep that in mind as you're doing this. Make sure you don't get any of this on the headliner. And if you get any on any of these painted surfaces or anything like that, just wipe it up quick and you should be good to go there. You then just want to be sure that you have all 8 mounting bolts loosely started before you tighten anything down, which will be done with a 4mm hex and again a 10mm socket on the nut side. And once again, keeping in mind that the front and rears are in those recessed holes inside, so I've just got a long 10mm socket to reach up in there, and then my 4mm hex out here again to tighten this up. Once you've done that at all 8 mounting locations, once again, we can first flip this back over We'll need to locate this in just a moment to install the paint protection film that we recommend between this edge trim and any painted surface, as well as take a look down the side rail and set our side rail height. So this one turned out pretty good the way it is right now. If for any reason it looks a little high or a little low front and rear, this is where you can come back in now that the mounts are tight to the roof, and you can loosen them on the side rail itself and adjust this as needed. But once again, this one looks pretty level. That's what you're looking for, a nice parallel line there, and we can jump back up to this front fairing. So then once you have that side rail height adjusted, we'll come back up to the front fairing. I did just loosely pop one of the screws back through to kind of hold this bottom edge down, and then all we're going to do there is kind of get it as close as possible to its final location. So we press it down tight to the roof, kind of pressing it down and forward, and then with it in that location, I'm going to mark along the front edge just using some masking tape. Basically, I'm going to go roughly 1/4 to 3/8 in front of the edge of this seal, because that's going to be the guideline for where we put the paint protection film, and if this has to adjust any further forward at all, we want to have coverage there as well, and that film will protect this front edge on this painted surface over time from any dust, dirt, and debris that might get in there. So once again, I'm just going to lay this out all the way along the front edge here. Once you're happy with that all the way across, I'm just going to take a marker and I'm going to mark kind of roughly where the end of the edge trim stops touching the roof, because at some point out here it does kind of pick up off the paint and come back out toward the side rail. So that is pretty close to the point for us. So I'm just going to plan on running it pretty much right out to the edge of this point. Once you have that marked on both sides, you can pop this front bolt back out and flip this up out of your way. And then we're going to clean this surface off with either a residue-free glass cleaner or an alcohol wipe, isopropyl alcohol, something that's not going to leave a residue on there, so that this paint film can kind of stick down and have a nice clean finish there. Now as for the film itself, I've referenced it a couple times already, but this is 3M paint protection film. This is what we have on hand and what we typically use. I'm sure there's other comparable products on the market that you could use as well. So just personal preference there. But basically this is going to go down like any vinyl sticker or anything that you may have installed before. You're just going to start one edge kind of on your marked location, trying not to touch the bottom any more than you absolutely have to, because it will leave a fingerprint in there. And once you're happy with that, a vinyl applicator card is kind of what we use. It works pretty well to press this down all the way across. As you can see there, you can peel it back up just a little and make adjustments as needed. And then you're just going to follow your tape line all the way across to get this laid down. On the other side, you will have to kind of cut it to length when you get close to that mark as well. Then once again, when you get over to this other side, you're just cutting this close to your mark. So you just want a decent pair of scissors, as this is somewhat a stretchy or flexible material. And then you can finish pressing that down and peel your blue tape or masking tape back out from under here all the way back across. With that wrapped up, we can flip this back down. We'll then reinstall the 2 remaining bolts out here on the side, and then go do the same thing over there. Then after you get that hardware in on both sides, once again, it's just a matter of pressing this down using those slotted adjustment holes nice and tight to the roof. You do just want to make sure that it looks relatively even from side to side, and then you can tighten that up once again with your 5/32. Once you have that set, it's really just a matter of running back through and tightening up all of your mounting hardware just to make sure everything's good to go there, and your roof rack installation is complete. You do, however, still have all of that interior stuff disassembled, so we need to jump back in there real quick and wrap all of that up. So starting off in here, if you remember, we've got those magnets. Those are going to support the majority of the weight of this thing, so we'll get it back up roughly positioned, and those will grab on. And then we'll go back and start in the back where we kind of finished our disassembly. So back here, you just want to, again, remember to reconnect the plug for these speakers. And then you can line up the alignment pin on the bottom as well as all of the clips, both up top and down here. So take as much time as you need with that and snap those back in. And then just don't forget to reinstall the bolt from down here. You can then come down and snap in this lower panel, and this is also a good time to mention that you're going to have to get all of this stuff back inside of the door seals, both up here as well as the trim, so you can get kind of just your finger or a plastic pry tool, something that's not going to damage the seal in behind there, and just work that back around there all the way across each door. Once you have these back in on both sides, you can then snap this centerpiece back in as well as the small seatbelt cover for right here. So just a little bit out of order now, but I do want to kind of backpedal and point out that there are 2 clips up inside of the back edge of this headliner that you need to guide into place as well when you're first getting that back up there. The one on this passenger side does have an alignment pin as well, so use caution, get that aligned properly, and then you won't have to take any of this back out to do that like I just did. We can then reinstall all of these grab handles. So again, if you've got those metal clips back in properly, this should just snap back into those holes. And then you'll reinstall the plastic covers here on the outside by just pressing straight in. And then repeat that on the remaining 2. The B-pillar now, you'll snap the top cover back in as well. And then the bottom of this does have an alignment pin right down there by where it had that screw that also needs to be installed before snapping this lower panel in. And then just before you snap that in, just take a second to make sure that this seatbelt adjuster is functioning properly. If not, you just need to pop that back off and get it positioned correctly. Then onto the A-pillar trim, where you're snapping it in on the bottom and being sure that you get this tether tied back into the stud up here in the same orientation that it was when we removed it. We'll reinstall that nut and then just pay attention to the alignment of that as we tighten it up. And then kind of the reason I stress the alignment of that is because there is a little cutout in the tab that is sliding over this stud that's going to line up with a small tab on the plastic retainer piece out here. Once you have that all in, again, make sure the bottom's lined up and then snap this back into place. This has both an alignment pin and a clip as well. So if it's not going, you may not be all the way in at the bottom or something down there. Then we'll grab our visor, we'll clip the wire back in up here and then feed that in carefully, hooking this in and rotating it up, and then reinstalling the bolt and the cover, and then the catch as well over here. Then over in the center, you can reconnect all your wiring in here and snap this cover back in place. And then you can go wrap any other remaining items up on the driver's side that you haven't done already, and that'll pretty much complete your install. So now you've got a nice new roof rack to haul all of your gear. As always, if you guys have any questions at all about this roof rack or anything else we offer here at JCR Off-Road, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always send us an email at info@jcroffroad.com or just call us at 269-353-1184.